Hi boys and girls, today I want to review fractions on a number line with you because we're going to be moving on and doing fractions that are more than one whole and comparing fractions on a number line soon, and I want to make sure that you understand the basic idea of fractions on a number line before we move on. So today we need to do some practice. It is really important that you practice drawing fractions out and getting an idea of what it's like to cut them apart and try to make equal sizes. So please get out a sheet of paper and a pencil and do this along with me. First things first, we're going to draw our number line. Notice I have two arrows on each end of my number line because number lines are continuous. In this particular fraction, we are going to only have one whole, so we do still need to put our start and an end point to show where our fraction begins and ends. We start with a 0 and a 1. That shows one whole space. It's similar to if we had a circle, like a whole circle. If I wanted to cut this circle into fourths, so let's say I want to make this fourths, I would cut it in half and then I would cut those halves in half again. It's the same thing on a number line. You're going to start it by cutting it in half and then you're going to cut each half in half again. That ends up getting us 4 equal parts. And the way you label the number line is you put your 0 fourths, 1 fourth, 2 fourths, 3 fourths, and 4 fourths. The difference is when you label in a number line, you label by counting up. When you label inside a shape or a picture, you don't count up. You don't put like 1 fourth, 2 fourths, 3 fourths, 4 fourths inside of there. You only put 1 fourth in each one because that is your unit. Your unit is the value of each piece. And when you're drawing an area model or a unit model like this, you always have your units labeled separately. If you count them, you would say 1 fourth, 2 fourths, 3 fourths, 4 fourths, but you only label a fourth in between. Basically, what that stands for is the unit. Just like here, each piece or part here is 1 fourth. So there's a fourth. There's another fourth. There's another fourth. And there's another fourth. You'll notice what I did here was I counted the space in between each tick mark. Sometimes a common mistake that I find with students is they'll look at a number line and they'll say, oh, it has 5 tick marks, so it must be fifths. Let me show you why that is wrong. So let's pretend that a student decided to label this and they counted those tick marks instead of the spaces between them. And they said this has to be fifths. 1 fifth, 2 fifths, 3 fifths, 4 fifths. Here's a way that you can check to make sure that you're labeling it correctly. Since this is one whole, and my one whole has 4 equal parts, what ends up happening is when I get to this final fraction on my number line, 1 is not the same as 4 fifths. Here's how you know if you did it correctly. If your whole has the same number, it's the numerator and the denominator, then you did it correctly. So 4 fifths is not the same number on the top and the bottom, which means we made a mistake. So if you did that, you made the mistake, you got to say to yourself, wait a minute, what did I do wrong? Oh, I counted the tick marks instead of the spaces between them. So if you did this correctly, like I did the first time, you're going to notice something different about it. So these ones we said were incorrect. What's correct about this is now my one whole has 4 fourths, the same number in the numerator and the denominator. And it makes sense because if I drew my one whole, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 fourths. That's the whole shape that's shaded in would be 4 fourths. So always do a double check and say to yourself, wait a minute, does my one whole have the same number on the top and the bottom? And if it doesn't, you probably made a mistake somewhere. This next one I want us to cut into thirds. So when you hear the word thirds, you should think immediately 3. Now, the first thing we always do is we put our 0 and our 1, and then we say to ourselves, wait, we need 3. So some kids do this. They're like, okay, 1, 2, 3, and they draw 3 lines. But look what happened when you do that. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces now. So we don't want 3 lines for thirds. We want 3 spaces for thirds. So here's a little quick trick for you. When you're drawing on a number line and you know you need a number like thirds, you're always going to draw 2 lines or tick marks. So you always draw 1 less tick mark than you need. So if I need thirds, I'm going to draw 2 lines to make 1, 2, 3 spaces. If I need fifths, I'm going to draw 4 lines. If I need eighths, I'm going to draw 7 lines. So here we go. We're going to label it. Now let's pretend I made a mistake and I said, oh, I see 4 lines. This must be fourths. 0 fourth, 1 fourth, 2 fourths, 3 fourths. And I double check and I say, 1 whole is the same as 3 fourths. No, it's not. These numbers have to be the same on the top and the bottom. So I know immediately I did something wrong. Oh, what I did was I counted the tick marks, not the space between. We want to count, let me get a different color to show you. We want to count this space between each one. Here you can see I have 1, 2, 3 parts. So if I labeled it correctly, 0 thirds is the beginning, 1 third, 2 thirds, and 3 thirds. And my quick check is, if I have 1 whole, I need to have the same number on the top and the bottom. If I do, I know I did it correctly.